This was basically something I put together very quickly for Bormark, because he needed a very specific setup, which is a microphone that you can control and move around. So you can move it around, you can control it, but you also need to be able to tip it on one side. So when you tilt it on one side, you need to be able to roll it from the base. Normally, what you would get, let's turn on the gimbal control here, is you would have this main control that you can move around, but you'll notice that the base cuts into the floor. If I pull that down, just like the AM rigs, I can change the pivot point. So now it's down here. Great. But that still doesn't solve the issue of being able to pivot from the edge. So with this rig, basically I just made a very simple setup that allows me to take this extra control here and tip it on its edge. But, well, that's great, but what if it has to tip side to side? Like, actually on the other side. Well, I created these controls here that allow you to rotate it, and now if you watch the head of the microphone, you'll notice that it's staying forward. So I can roll it all along the base with no issues, and it just moves. So now I can roll it around so a character can do this with it, and it works. You can also spin it around, so as they're rolling, you can add a twist to it as well. So that's basically the rig. I also created a little controller. You can move this up and down and rotate it, as well as this. So very simple, like not that much to it. Honestly, the rigging itself, I took maybe like an hour to do. It took a little bit to try and figure out exactly how I was going to do this. The big thing was that I went a little overboard with sculpting the head here. I wanted to, usually I do things very quickly, and I wanted to really make sure all my edge loops were nice and clean. So I really went through and tried to make very nice edge loops and geometry, because I figured, let's actually do something that's proper instead of just rushed. So in terms of the rigging, the way I did this was very simple, with just a little bit of math involved. So if we open up the rig here, let's open up the outliner. So the main rig is just a hierarchy. So you have the mic layout control, then you have the cog control, you have the gimbal control right there. This allows you to create offsets to things. So far, all of that is pretty simple. Now, where it gets a little complex is how I set up this section right here. So the way this is set up, and I'm going to recreate it here, is we basically have just a collection of locators. So we have the roll locator. This is the locator that's going to control how the object actually rolls. Then we have the tilt control. This is where the pivot point is. And then an offset locator. So we've actually got this, well, actually 4, and then you've got the spin locator. This section right here, this is what makes this work. So the way I set this up is basically we have the roll locator, which is at the pivot point, and this control controls where the pivot point is going to be. So basically it would be like if I took this, let's duplicate that, and we'll call this roll, and we'll call this pivot, or we'll actually call this the tilt. So we'll keep the names the same. So this is the control that I want to be able to tilt from. So use this attribute here. And I need it to be able to spin from the center point. So all I do is I create a hierarchy. So the roll controls the tilt. So if I take this and move it, you can see that spins around, just like what we get here, where the control spins around the base, like so. So now I could rotate this in any direction I want. Let's make it a little bit bigger. And that follows along. Great. But the problem with that is this is going to take all of the geometry that's attached to it. So let me figure that out right there. So let's say you were to attach the geometry of the microphone to this. This is going to spin the whole microphone around instead of keeping it in line. So let's create a simple cube here just to show that. So if I was to create this hierarchy and add the cube to it, we get this. And let's make sure that stays in the center. Interesting. There we go. So if we take this, you'll see that the cube spins as well, which is not what I want, because the microphone should stay in place as you change the pivot point around it. So we just have to add an extra layer. So I'll just take this. Let's create a new locator. And we'll snap it into the center here. And this is going to be our offset. So basically what we need is to add it to the hierarchy. So instead of the tilt controlling the cube, we'll put the offset in there and then attach the cube to the offset, like so. So we've added an extra layer in there. Great. What does that do? Nothing, because they all move together. Now if I use this, you can see it still pivots up there. That's good. That's what I want. But how do I get it to stay in place? Well, this is where the math comes in. Basically, all I need to do is take my roll control. So I'm going to go to the window node editor. The node editor in Maya is a great tool. It allows you to create connections in all sorts of interesting ways. So I'm going to take my roll and my offset and bring them both in. And basically, what I want is the roll to connect to the offset. So the rotate to the rotate. What this means is that any value I put into this control, so let's say -31 right there, that will also get that. So now this cube is going to spin twice as fast. You'll notice it's spinning twice as fast as the rest. Okay. Well, now I just need to negate it. So instead of just this straight connection, let's add a multiply node. Multiply, divide. There we go. So I'm going to take that input and just change it up a little bit. So the rotate is going to come in here. In the multiply divide, we're going to set it to multiply by -1. And then we're going to output that to the rotation. So now whatever value you have, it'll just be reversed and then put back into here. Which means that when I rotate this, you'll see -31 there. This one is now set to +31. Which means that as I rotate this, the cube stays in place because it's following the offset. But because the offset is following the tilt control, I can now do this, and you'll notice that the cube stays in place. So now I can just tweak that tilt however I want. That's really it. Now, the next thing is we need to be able to spin this. So that's where the spin locator comes in. And the spin is basically another locator right over the offset. So let's reset this here. So, like that. So we'll create another locator right there. And this is going to be the spin. So we'll just add another layer to this. So let's actually rename it spin. And this goes and gets parented to the offset, and the cube gets parented to the spin, like that. So we're just making a hierarchy. And now this will control just its rotation Y, just like that. Which means that I can tilt this, I can rotate like so, and then use the rotation Y here to spin it right in place. Done. Now, technically, I could use this one as well, but because its values are being calculated, I can't control it. This is why you need that extra spin one. And there you go. Now, instead of parenting the cube here like I've done, I just constrained it. So what that does is it makes it so that you don't get that selection hierarchy. So even though I select this, you see this geometry doesn't get selected. Now, in order to get it all to work correctly so that you're not having to select all these locators, I just created my own attributes in here. So the pivot role is not a control technically on here. The pivot role is controlling the roll locator's rotate Y. So when I adjust this, it's just adjusting that rotate Y of this locator. When I use the spin, that's controlling the rotate Y of the spin locator. That's it. So I'm using this hierarchy of objects and just using them to create an offset that I can use these. How do you promote these to the channel box? So to create your own attributes, it's actually very simple. You can just go to select the control you want. So let's say I want to take this and I'm going to create a new attribute. So I'm going to add attribute right there. And you can write any attribute you want in here. So let's say we want box visibility. We want to control the visibility of this box here. So you'll write the name. Now this is the long name, which means you can make it nice and pretty. So next you choose your data type. What kind of information is it? Is it going to be vector? Is it going to be a float? Is it going to be Boolean? Boolean is on and off. Enumeration, so you can actually list your own things. So you could put high res, low res, proxy right in there. In this case, I want an on-off switch, so that's going to be Boolean. Integer is whole numbers, float is like decimal points, and then I forget string. I always forget string. I don't know why. Integer is min max. Okay, maybe that's it. Yeah, and vector is whole number. No, wait. Or vectors. See, I always forget. So anyway, I want an on-off. Usually I only use floats and booleans typically. So with that, we have our box visibility. Off or on. Right there. Now I just need to connect it to whatever I need. So let's go into our general editors, connection editor. This is one of my favorite windows. So normally with things like constraints, this constrains, translates and rotates, potentially scales to things. That's great for animation purposes, but for rigging purposes, the connection editor is in many ways a lot easier and a lot faster to use, and you can connect anything. It's similar to using the node editor, but I find the interface is a little faster for things like this. It does the same thing as the node editor. And what I want to do is I'll take my control here, let's load it to the left, and you can see our outputs and inputs. So it's going from this control to this. So whatever's on the left, the from is controlling the one on the right. Now we take our box and we'll reload the right, and I'm just going to look for my visibility. So my box visibility is going to control the visibility of the cube right there. You'll see it turns yellow. Now I can just go boop, and there we go. I have this one control that can control my box visibility, my pivot, my spin, all of that. Nice and easy. It's the same way I created here there's this gimbal control. If I don't want it on, I can turn it off right there. It's the same thing. I created a gimbal control attribute that now allows me to control the visibility of the curve here. Now, one thing to be aware of is you don't want to control the straight visibility, or else what you're going to end up having is an issue of hierarchy. So, for example, let's take our cube back and turn it on, and let's create a sphere and parent that to the cube, like so. Now, I want to turn off the cube, but imagine like this is a control structure. I want to turn off the cube, but I don't want to avoid or turn off the sphere. I just want the cube turned off. If I do this, they both turn off. That's not good. This is because I'm turning off the cube itself and not its geometry. So what it's doing is turning off the cube and then anything in its hierarchy afterwards. So I would actually have to tweak this a little bit. So let's right click here and I'm going to break the connection. So right here, break connection. That destroys that connection between the two things. And instead of controlling the cube itself, so let's go back into our channel box here, or our connection editor. We'll reload the left. Oop. And now, instead of selecting the cube itself, I want to select the cube's shape node. The shape node is the actual geometry of the cube. It's what controls its shape. Now, how do you get to that easily? Well, the easiest way for something like this is just to go to display in the outliner and turn on shapes. And I'm going to go down to my cube and select my P cube shape right there. And I'll reload that. Now we'll do the same thing. The box visibility selects the visibility right here. There we go. Now, if I turn this on and off, the cube disappears, but the sphere stays in place. Because this is actually turning off the geometry of the sphere, or sorry, of the cube, not the cube as a whole in its relationship to the hierarchy, if that makes sense. Now I can just turn off shapes right there, and voila. Now I have, in this case, for example, the gimbal control, which is, you can see in the middle of the hierarchy right here. I can turn it on and off without affecting everything else underneath it. If I had just taken its main visibility, all the other controls would have disappeared when I tried to do that visibility trick. So that's pretty much the rig. Is it complex? No. If I had a little bit more time with this, what I would like to do is actually set it up so that it's a joint structure. And I might do this if I have more time later on this week, is actually create some joints down the middle here and set it so that you can actually bend it and create proper deformation with it. Now it's kind of just a straight stick, which great for simple shots, but not great when you want to do motion blur or just kind of exaggerate something. It's not that fun. So that would be my next step, is kind of reworking it to have that joint structure up the middle. Which control would you constrain the hand to? So the hand could be constrained to pretty much, well, actually, if you're holding onto the top part, I would constrain it to this control here. This is the one that controls the spin. So this one here just controls the little grip control here. So you can tighten that on and off. It doesn't do much else. I was debating whether that should even be there. I could, maybe on the next version, I'll add a control here in the cog, or maybe in the layout, to turn that off so you don't even see it. But yeah, it would be this one. And if you're having the character hold onto the mic head, I would constrain it to this one because this controls the tilt. So if they're holding down here, constrain to this control. If they're holding here, constrain here. If they're grabbing down at the base here, you could constrain it to this control or to the cog. So it really just depends on what level they're holding at. So, can I connect axis with visibility? Axis, yeah, you can connect anything. So for example, if I wanted to connect the translate Z to the visibility control, I could do that. Now, it's going to have issues where visibility is only on and off, but it's technically a value of 0 to 1. So let's actually try this right here. Let's take a cube and a sphere. This is where you can get very creative with your connections. So I'm actually going to set the cube. Actually, let's move it out here. So let's go to Windows, Connection Editor, and we'll take our cube and have it control the sphere. Now I want the cubes translate Y to control the visibility of the sphere. So the translate Y is at 0. That's off. If I move this up, now it's past 1, it goes on. So now I can turn this on and off, but you'll notice that it only turns on and off when it's at a value of 0. If I go past that, technically it's no longer 0, which means it's on. So you'll have some tricky things like that, but it can work. What you would probably want to do is put a multiplier in there. So basically making it so that the value at a certain point is either 1 or 0. And Gravity Gaming, thank you so much for the follow. I really appreciate that. So hopefully that makes sense. It's really just the understanding the hierarchy and then putting things together in order to create that pivot control. So once again, it's making it so that we can just tilt here and spin the mic or rotate the mic, roll it around. There we go. And you can see how by taking the time to make this rig, it's not complex, but it works. It would save me a lot of time, because the alternative is to try and spin this control around and keep that base flat the whole time. That would be very tricky. Have you learned 3ds Max? Nice. 3ds Max is great for gaming. I used it a long time ago, many years ago. Oh, and Jerome, thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much for the subscription. And oh, I really appreciate that. Gotta do the dance. One day I'll have that standing desk and I'll be able to do the whole thing. Yeah, it's, if you understand a little bit of the hierarchy and how like you can create these offsets, it's amazing how much you can build that gives you a lot of extra